When the sunlight fades away and darkness begins to devour the last sounds of a long day, that is when the real stories begin. Welcome to Creepy Night Narratives. I am your guide for tonight. Double-check your windows, pull your blanket up high, and pray that, as the rustling sound you just heard behind you is only the wind. Shall we begin? This is the story of a young couple who had been married for 3 years. The husband, Fong, repaired phones, and the wife, Hien, sold clothes at the local market. Life was quite difficult, so both had to work hard, relying on each other to build a happy family. Through frugality, they managed to buy a modest house to live in. With his knack for repairing and upcycling, Fong soon renovated the once empty house and filled it with recycled furniture. Hien, being resourceful and having good taste, bought fabric scraps to sew curtains, bed sheets, and pillowcases, decorating their small home beautifully. Overall, both were responsible to themselves and their family, and that was enough to make them happy. Their joy doubled when Hien found out she was pregnant. It would be a bit more challenging, but it didn't matter. For the sake of their family, Fong and Hien were ready for the big goal ahead, working and saving up to provide for their child. Time passed, and the moment arrived for their firstborn daughter to come into the world. In that wonderful moment, they decided to name her Hoa An, hoping she would always be safe and at peace. Perhaps due to their lack of parenting experience, they didn't know why baby Anne often startled and let out piercing cries, as if someone had just frightened her. People say that children's eyes are pure, and their souls are untainted by worldly thoughts, making them susceptible to seeing ghosts, which might explain her sudden frights. Hien became more meticulous with her offerings at the household altars, from the earth god to Guan Yin, praying with Hua An's name for her to grow up healthy, safe, and undisturbed. The situation seemed to improve, and taking care of her became a bit easier. As time went by, Hien began to feel a heavy, aching pain in her shoulder from carrying baby Anne every day. Pain relief patches were almost constantly stuck to her shoulder since the baby was born. But seeing her daughter's intelligence and mischievousness made Hien forget about her own ailments. Today was Anne's first birthday celebration, Thoi Noi. The couple prepared a small offering tray at home to celebrate together. It was time for the ritual where Anne would crawl to the tray and pick her favorite item. They placed her about 2 meters away from the tray to observe her reaction. Instead of crawling toward the tray and ignored her parents' coaxing, she just stared intently at a corner of the house and crawled over there, not knowing what fascinated her so much. Fong pushed the tray toward that corner. The couple was waiting anxiously to see what object their daughter would choose when, suddenly, Anne shrieked. Looking at the tray, they couldn't understand what was wrong with their daughter to cause such a reaction. She suddenly became fussy and irritable, crying uncontrollably no matter how much they comforted her. She cried until her face turned red, eventually falling asleep from sheer exhaustion. There was simply nothing they could do. The couple looked at each other, genuinely confused about what the problem was, or if they had performed the ritual for the 12 midwives incorrectly. Checking the offering table, it was exactly like any other family's. Nothing was out of place. With Anne finally asleep, they felt somewhat relieved. They hurried to clean up the offerings as night began to fall. Anne slept so soundly that she didn't even wake up to nurse. They decided to just let her sleep. Ian's shoulder felt even heavier and ached much more than before. Fong checked her shoulder and asked in confusion, "Did you bump into something while walking?" He noticed a dark, reddish-black bruise on her shoulder that looked quite severe. Ian replied, "I carry the baby a lot, so my shoulder gets swollen, but I don't understand why it feels so heavy today." Fong rubbed some medicated oil on his wife's shoulder. Exhausted from cooking and preparing for the birthday rituals, she soon fell asleep next to their child. Fong had to stay up and finish repairing a phone to deliver it to a customer the next morning. In the dead of night, he moved carefully to minimize noise so his wife and child could sleep. While focused on the phone's components, he heard the jingling sound of a toy rattle. Thinking his baby had woken up, he called out into the room, "Are you awake, honey?" The rattle kept shaking continuously, but receiving no answer from his wife. Fong went in to check. The rattling sound was non-stop, but the moment he opened the door, Anne's arm dropped instantly, yet she was still fast asleep. It was bizarre. Could a 1-year-old baby really be sleepwalking? Glancing over, he saw his wife was also sound asleep, so he didn't dare wake them. He returned to his desk, but every 5 or 10 minutes, he heard the rattle jingle again. Whenever he went into the room, Anne was still fast asleep. Fong eventually took the rattle and put it away to stop overthinking it. The peaceful early morning atmosphere was shattered by Anne's screaming and crying. The couple jolted awake to find the house a mess and Anne crawling everywhere. Hien blamed herself, not understanding how she could have slept so deeply that she didn't wake up while her baby was wreaking havoc. They had no idea what Anne had been doing or playing with the night before, but her hands were covered in soot, which was smeared everywhere. Tiny handprints were dragged all along the walls. Anne was crying fiercely from hunger. Her cry sounded very strange today, sometimes high-pitched, sometimes incredibly hoarse. Perhaps crying too much had affected her vocal cords. Even after drinking her milk, she refused to play with her toys, shaking her head at whatever they handed her, thinking the baby was feeling stuffy indoors. Hien decided to carry her outside, but as soon as they stepped out the door, Anne cried even louder, her body thrashing with such strength that Hien couldn't control her. The baby threw her body backward toward the inside of the house, as if she refused to go outside. They truly didn't know what she wanted or how to please her anymore. Put her down, she cried. Hungry, she cried. Taken outside, she cried, sobbing uncontrollably until her face turned red. Only when she was holding tightly onto Hien would Anne stop crying. While hugging her mother during a midday nap, she suddenly startled awake and let go of Hien. She started crawling around the house in circles, babbling and laughing with someone invisible. Anne's familiar laugh eased Hien's worries a bit. It felt like her real daughter was finally back, whereas since last night, she had seemed like a completely different, ill-tempered child. Seeing that her child was playing by herself, Hien finally had time to clean the house. She started wiping away Anne's handprints on the wall. After wiping a few, she noticed something bizarre. There was something wrong with these handprints. Hien quickly took Anne's hand and measured it against the mark, only to find that her baby's hand was much smaller than the print on the wall. Looking closely, the mark wasn't created by a small hand dragging to make a long shape. It was literally a full handprint with long, bony fingers pressed directly onto the wall in a continuous path. Whose hand was this? Hien looked higher up the wall and saw the exact same handprints near the ceiling corner. Terrified, she grabbed her baby and ran out of the house. But the misery was that whenever she was carried outside, the baby would scream and cry. It was incomprehensible. They bumped into a neighbor who had experience calming kids, but it was no use. The baby hit and bit the neighbor. Hien scolded her. "Why are you so fierce today if you're this naughty? Mommy won't love you anymore." Upon being scolded, the baby suddenly fell silent. She stared at her mother with a gaze that was an eerie mix of surprise and coldness, as if thinking, "Why are you yelling at me today?" And then she bit her mother's hand. Unable to bear it, Hien had no choice but to bring Anne back inside the house, though her heart was filled with dread. Now, Anne sat perfectly still, looking up at the ceiling, looking side to side, blinking at the corners as if she were watching someone crawling all over the house. Her face grew tense. Something was terribly wrong. Hien could feel it in her bones. This was not baby Anne. That evening, Fong came home to find his wife holding their baby and singing absent-mindedly. Fong asked, "Oh, so you finally decided to step out of the house?" Hiding the real reason, Hien replied, It was too hot and sunny this morning, so she refused to go out. Now that it's evening and the weather is cool, she finally agreed." Just then, a woman selling fried fish balls walked by, and baby Anne insistently demanded some. Without overthinking it, Hien bought a portion, cut it into small pieces, and fed it to her. Fong noticed and exclaimed, "Good heavens! Our child is only 1 year old and can't even chew properly yet. Why are you letting her eat that?" Hien didn't say a word. Right before Fong's eyes, baby Anne was happily chewing the fried fish ball. She chewed it thoroughly into a mush before swallowing. Later, Fong noticed a bruise on Hien's arm and asked, "Wait, what happened to you now? Still feeding the baby?" Hien replied, "The baby bit me." Puzzled, Fong said, "But she hasn't even teethed yet." Hien looked back at the bruise on her arm. There was a very deep red mark, looking exactly as if a full set of teeth had bitten into it. She immediately stumbled over her words. "Well, I got bitten by Auntie Bar's child." Feeling sorry for her, Fong comforted his wife. "My goodness, let me put some medicated oil on it. The kids in the neighborhood are so aggressive lately. Try to limit our baby playing with them from now on. Okay." As night fell, Fong diligently continued his phone repair work at home. The sound of water running in the washroom, mixed with baby Anne's laughter, helped relieve his stress from work. Baby Anne was running around the house, dashing back and forth right behind Fong's back. Keeping his eyes glued to the phone he was fixing, he called out, careful not to fall. A moment later, the sound of the running water stopped, and at that very second, the front door slid open. Hien had just returned from somewhere, carrying baby Anne in her arms. Startled, Fong asked, "Wait, weren't you just bathing the baby?" Clueless. Hien replied, "No, I've been carrying her around the neighborhood listening to music. Why do you ask?" Not wanting to worry Hien, Fong brushed it off. I just saw the washroom floor was wet and thought you were bathing her in there. But I forgot. I just washed my feet. However, Fong couldn't stop thinking about it. Their child had only just learned to crawl. How could she possibly run around like that, from the strange rattling sounds last night to what had just happened? Fong felt that something was terribly wrong in the house. Late at night, while the couple was fast asleep, the blanket covering a peacefully sleeping baby, Anne, was suddenly pulled away. Baby Anne was seemingly dragged slowly onto the floor by an invisible force. She then opened her eyes and stared blankly at the ceiling. Suddenly, she stood up on her own 2 feet. Even though Baby Anne couldn't walk steadily yet, at that moment, her steps were incredibly proficient. She kept walking around the house in circles, hopping onto the table and climbing up the cabinet in a very bizarre manner. Fong's hands trembled violently as he reviewed the footage. He was packing up the hidden camera he had secretly installed the night before. On the grainy, static-filled night vision screen, he saw Baby Anne's eyes glowing brightly. Looking back at his wife, who had just woken up, he noticed her shoulder was even more swollen and painful. Looking closely, Hien's shoulder seemed to be slightly tilted to one side. Sensing things were getting worse, Fong took his wife to see a doctor. The doctor asked if she had been carrying anything heavy on one shoulder, as that was the likely cause of her misaligned posture. At the clinic, Hien took the opportunity to step on the scale to check her weight. Fong and Hien watched as the needle constantly wavered up and down, never settling on a single number, as if someone was repeatedly stepping on and off the scale with her. Suddenly, Auntie Ba, their neighbor, called and urged the couple to come home immediately because she couldn't handle Baby Anne anymore. She didn't know what was wrong, but the baby was crying and throwing a severe tantrum. The 2 of them hurried home to take Anne back. Anne looked entirely exhausted, enduring an unbearable mix of pain and fatigue. Fong decided to try a supernatural method he had learned about. From where his wife was sitting, he walked exactly 7 steps straight ahead, then bent over to look at his wife from between his own legs. He panicked when he saw another small child sitting on his wife's shoulder. It was a shadowy, blurry figure that kept flickering in and out of sight. As if realizing it had been spotted, the figure turned its head to look at him, and Fong saw its eyes glow radiantly. Terrified, Fong immediately grabbed his wife to leave. "Wait, where are you taking me?" Hien asked in confusion. Fong firmly replied, "To the local temple." Hien suddenly started struggling and refused to go. "No, I'm not going anywhere." Why would we go out in the middle of the night? What if we get sicker? I want to stay home. After much difficult persuasion, Fong finally managed to bring Hien there. Seeing the baby crying as if she were out of breath, the temple keeper looked out from inside, perhaps sensing something clearly. He said in a stern voice, "We do not like noise in here." Instantly, baby Anne stopped crying. Fong held his wife's hand tightly and led her into the temple to sit in front of the altar. Baby Anne hugged her mother stiffly, looked at her, then raised a finger to her lips and calmly shook her head. Fong noticed that Anne's gestures were not those of a typical toddler. It felt as if she had the clear awareness of an older person, rather than a 1-year-old infant. "Hey there, child," the temple keeper called out. Baby Anne immediately turned to look. "Do you want to come with me and become a monastic?" Hearing his question, she shook her head. "If you don't listen, you'll get spanked." At this, she let out a terrified shriek. Fong felt incredibly anxious. "Sir, my child has been acting very strange lately. She cries endlessly, and the sound of her crying is weird too." The temple keeper reassured him. "Calm down. Let me handle this." He then asked strictly, "So, have you named her yet?" Hien answered in confusion. "Yes, her name is Hoa An." The temple keeper declared firmly, "No, not this one. I mean the child before her." Hien was caught off guard. Fong was completely bewildered. Hien sobbed as she confessed, I named the previous baby Tien Ngan." Hearing this, Fong realized that Hoa An was not his first daughter. The temple keeper entered a meditative state, muttering, "Tien Ngan, Tien Ngan." He pointed at the altar and said, "Look up there. There is a rosary." Understanding his intention, Fong took it down. The temple keeper ordered, "Put it on baby Anne immediately." She screamed, waving her hands and shaking her head frantically. By now, Fong knew that the child in front of him wasn't Hoa An anymore, but Tien Ngan. He moved to place the rosary around the baby's neck, but she used both hands to block it. Watching this gave him goosebumps. Her eyes no longer held the innocence of a 1-year-old. He used force to put it around her neck, and she burst into convulsing sobs. "Sir, is she going to be okay? Please let her take it off." Fong panicked. The temple keeper calmly took baby Anne into his arms and placed her right in front of him. "Sit here cross-legged." She followed his orders perfectly. The infant sat cross-legged neatly, without any of the clumsiness expected of a baby, the temple keeper placed both of his hands on baby Anne's shoulders and muttered an incantation. Baby Anne cried again. Her cries grew louder and then broke off. Amidst the crying, a heart-wrenching laugh could be heard. It was a mix of baby Anne's voice and someone else's. Baby Anne kept pointing to her mouth and shaking her head non-stop. The temple keeper faced the altar again and said, "Fong, take that glass of plain water down and give it to baby Anne to drink." She covered her mouth with her hands and shook her head, refusing to drink. The temple keeper said, "Drink it. Only then can you open your mouth to speak." After drinking, baby Anne sat cross-legged again, bowed her head, and cried. The temple keeper made room for the couple. "Now, whatever you two want to ask, ask." Hien choked up and asked, "Tiangan, Tiangan, my child." She watched as Tiangan replied in agony, "Do you love me, child? I don't love you. Why are you following me? Why did you abandon me?" Fong immediately asked Hien. "This child. Did you ever, Dad?" Hien confessed her dark secret. 5 years before their wedding, Hien and Fong were living together, and Hien found out she was unexpectedly pregnant. Because she was too young, financially struggling, and terrified of her relatives finding out, she didn't even dare to tell Fong. Feeling completely trapped, Hien decided to get a secret abortion to return her life to a stable balance. Fong's face turned red with anger as he scolded her. "Why didn't you share this with me back then? Why did you make such a decision on your own?" Amidst her pain, Hien was deeply regretful. Her reckless, thoughtless actions had caused the spirit of her aborted child to cling to her shoulder. Seeing Hoa An being loved and cared for, the truth was that ever since her first birthday, Hien knew baby An was being possessed and harassed by Tien Ngan. The spirit just wanted to embrace its mother. Feeling immense pity for her ill-fated child, Hien silently endured the torment, hoping her child would eventually find peace and be reincarnated. That was also the exact reason why Hien was hesitant and refused to go to the temple earlier. The temple keeper gently advised the spirit, "I know a mother loves her child, but the living and the dead cannot coexist. Now, if you want what's best for yourself, for your mother, and for your little sister, you must move on and follow your ancestors. Your mother will light incense for you properly and go to the pagoda. If you keep clinging to the living like this, people will get sick, families will be torn apart, chaos will ensue. and there will be no one to worship you. Hearing this, Thien An wailed in agony. Then baby An rolled over and fell peacefully asleep. Fong and Hien, bewildered, asked, "What does this mean, sir?" "It means Tien Nungan has agreed to move on and follow her ancestors." Hugging her baby tightly, Hien sobbed. Fong also embraced the two of them with deep sadness, hoping this pain would soon fade. From then on, the family meals of Hien and Fong always included offerings, and now an extra bowl of rice was set out for baby Nungan, hoping that in some other realm she could enjoy a warm meal with her ancestors and parents. Thanks to the couple's diligence and hard work, their family life gradually became more prosperous, and baby Anne grew up to be increasingly smart, healthy, and adorable. Thank you for walking with me to the very end of the darkness today. If these paranormal encounters have left you unsettled, or if you have witnessed something similar in the real world, please leave a comment and share your story. Every subscription is a candle that helps me shed light on the next mysterious shadows. But for now, be sure to lock your doors carefully before sleep. Goodbye, and I will see you in our next chilling footage.